Hello, my name is Tony. Film director Michael Reeves died of an accidental barbiturate overdose in 1969, aged 25. Of his 3 films, the last one showcased phenomenal promise. Witchfinder General is a true classic, the second best British folk horror film next to The Wicker Man. One of the best British films ever made in any decade. Who can say what Reeves might have achieved had he lived? Shame we never got to find out. Reeves' first film in 1966, The She-Beast, aka Revenge of the Blood Beast, was a cheapo Italian trasher made on a scalpel-thin budget. It featured the striking Barbara Steele, who they could only afford for one day's shooting, so she was made to work an 18-hour day and was not best pleased. Also appearing was Reeves' friend, English actor Ian Ogilvy. Ogilvy would turn up again in his next film, The Sorcerers, in 1967, as well as Witchfinder General in 68. The She-Beast was an uneven and tonally inconsistent affair, but benefited from early flashes of Reeves' singularly adventurous style. A crash course exercise in his learning the trade. And did he learn it well enough to make something outstanding with his next project, The Sorcerers? Yeah, I think he did. The Sorcerers is a horror science fiction psycho-thriller hybrid that integrates those genres into a coherent and powerful whole. It may be cheap and occasionally tacky, look like a psychedelic kitchen sink drama made by Hammer, only with less oversaturation and lurid technicolor pop, but it's a stunning little 60s parable nonetheless. Elderly couple Professor Marcus Montserrat, Boris Karloff, and his wife Estelle, Catherine Lacey, live a threadbare hand-to-mouth existence on the fringes of society in a shabby terraced house in London. Montserrat styles himself a medical hypnotist, but due to some unspecified scandal in his past has been ridiculed and marginalised by the medical community. I'm guessing some dodgy shit went horribly wrong. I say this with some confidence because of what happens next. Montserrat has invented a machine that can do some amazing stuff. As well as pumping out a very 60s Pink Floydian psychedelic light show and generating some cool electronic audio vibes, it not only hypnotizes a subject but establishes a psychic link between them and others who can remotely control the actions of the subject and experience sensorially what they do. The subject themselves is unaware of this, entering a hypnotic fugue much like a blackout. They have no memory or knowledge of what they may have done whilst being remotely controlled. At heart, Montserrat's intentions are benign. He wants his invention to be used for the good of mankind. His wife, though, not so much. She's one to watch, that Estelle. First, though, they need a test subject. A young person, they reason, as 60s youth are all jaded, overstimulated and bored, and therefore susceptible to new experiences with little question. Already well on their way to being susceptible dupes, live-action Pinocchio knockoffs. Montserrat begins his search for a likely-looking human plank, wandering the London streets by night, keeping his eyes open. A good strategy, as he'd either walk into a lamppost or step in front of a bus. Mike Roscoe, Ian Ogilvy, is a jaded, overstimulated and bored guy about town. He goes to pubs and nightclubs with his girlfriend Nicole, Elizabeth Ursey, one-time girlfriend of Michael Caine no less, and his best friend car mechanic Alan, Victor Henry. He's a bit arrogant, disparaging, mocking and superior, you know the type, and he feels unfulfilled in most aspects of his life. Join the fucking club, chum. After abandoning Alan and Nicole to wander the streets alone, he crosses paths with Montserrat. These days, a furtive old guy suggesting to a 20-something chap out of the blue, "Come back to my place, young man. I've got something to show you. I think you'll like it." Might not seem all that kosher. Well, maybe the 60s were more innocent times, because Mike takes up the offer of a new and thrilling experience with Boris Karloff and his creepy wife. He's impressed with the electronic kit at Montserrat's gaff and agrees to give it a shot. After lots of weird electro noise and a psychedelic light show that makes his face look like it's melting into dripping blobs of multicolored plasma, Mike is under the influence and can be controlled by Marcus and Estelle when they concentrate. They see through his eyes and feel what he feels, physically and emotionally. So Mike goes back to the nightclub and picks up Nicole. I'm thinking they're gonna get him to take her home and give her a good old, but no. Instead, he sneaks her into a deserted hotel swimming pool and goes for a midnight dip. Marcus and Estelle can feel the sensations of water over their bodies, the exhilaration tradition of swimming. Marcus imagines such a process will enhance the lives of the elderly and disadvantaged. Estelle imagines it will enhance her twisted wants and desires and persuades her husband to sit on the discovery for the time being. Next up, Estelle has seen an expensive fur coat in a shop window. She coerces Marcus into helping her control Mike to steal it for her. Marcus stipulates it will just be this one time only, purely as an experiment. During the nighttime robbery, Mike cuts his hand. Identical cuts appear on the hands of Marcus and Estelle in the exact same place at the exact same time. Estelle becomes the dominant controlling force as Marcus weakens. Events escalate. Mike is made to steal Alan's motorcycle and, taking Nicole along for the ride, drives it at full and dangerous speed to satisfy Estelle's desire for more intense vicarious experiences. On returning the bike, when Alan remonstrates with Mike, she has him violently beat Alan up with unbridled ferocity. Disturbed by his wife's increasing recklessness and perversity, Marcus threatens to get Mike back and reverse the process. Estelle knocks him unconscious, ties him to a sideboard and smashes his equipment to prevent any chance of rebooting their puppet. Estelle has Mike murder his friend Audrey, Susan George, with the scissors, then strangle nightclub pop singer Laura, Sally Sheridan, in an alley. The Fuzz become involved in the form of Inspector Matalon Ivor Dean, who identifies Mike as his prime suspect in the two murders. Mike flees in a stolen car and a high-speed chase ensues. Estelle has been knocking back the gin, the old mother's ruin, diminishing her control. Marcus intervenes and causes Mike to crash. The car bursts into flames and he is incinerated. Back at Chez Montserrat, both Marcus and Estelle are finally seen as burnt and charred corpses on the kitchen floor. The Sorcerers is a 60s film that doesn't seek to romanticize the 60s, doesn't paint it as a predominantly colourful, swinging, vibrant period of youth and hope. The approach is more downbeat, grimmer, concentrating on the less glamorous aspects. The kids, if you can call them that, look vaguely disinterested and emotional, smoking and drinking, dancing mechanically and inexpressively. The streets are dark, overcast, colours toned down, corner shops and pubs unchanged since the early 50s, sombre and drained of life. A wimpy restaurant, remember those? A new franchise at the time, is uncomfortably basic, horribly functional, unwelcoming. The garage where Alan works is a dingy, oily place, and the antique junk shop dealership Mike runs, the Glory Hole, yep, nice, only has one customer, a camp gentleman who doesn't buy anything, probably just attracted by the sign outside. No one and nothing seems full of the joys of spring exactly, which is great, really, as it adds to the eerie atmosphere. An atmosphere is something this film has in spades. Restricted by the tight budget he had to work with, 50,000 quid, Reeves couldn't afford elaborate special effects. For the sequence where Mike is subjected to Montserrat's device, the electronic audio tracks and melt-in psychedelic lighting are surprisingly effective. The facial distortion effects combined with crash zooms and close-ups of eyes give a reasonable impression of psychological transformation taking place. The mind control parts are cleverly composed and edited, cut in between Mike and whatever he's being made to do, and Marcus and Estelle sat in their kitchen reacting accordingly. Soundtrack differentials are employed to switch between ambient signatures. For instance, the nightclub is all loud music and raised voices, cutting back to the kitchen, which is silent save for a ticking clock, and the low volume exchanges between Marcus and Estelle as they sit facing each other at the table and concentrating on pulling Mike's strings. What supports the frankly implausible narrative of the performances? A clearly ailing Boris Karloff is given his second best late career role after Bogdanovich's Targets, in which he played a burned out horror movie actor. Here he's a horror movie actor for real, playing a burned out professor, and he does it with dignity and a vital smattering of compassion and pathos. Ultimately, he wants to make the world a better place, whilst his wife wants to make it dance to her tune. Considering they've been married a long time, the most unfeasible aspect for me is Marcus failing to clock just how nuts his missus is. Surely there must have been a few pointers over the years. Catherine Lacey, who debuted as a nun in Hitchcock's The Lady Vanishes in 1938, is great as the unhinged Estelle. Power and control go straight to her head, and she takes great satisfaction in taunting and dominating Marcus, whilst getting her rocks off to vicarious experiences of speed, physical violence and murder. The scene that speaks volumes about her character is the murder of Laura. When she's got got Mike to take her into the alley, she has him terrorize the girl, demanding repeatedly that she sing for him. Laura becomes increasingly fearful and distressed until Mike closes in and throttles the life out of her. From this, Estelle derives almost orgasmic pleasure. It's a moment of pure sadism, a subject that would be explored more fully and graphically in Reeves' third and final film, Witchfinder General. For whatever reason, Ian Ogilvy's character Mike is not exactly likeable or sympathetic. He doesn't deserve his fate, but then he's something of an arsehole, so no one's going to weep buckets over him. Ogilvy's quizzically foppish and clean-cut good looks are ideally suited to the sort of hedonistic entitled jerk who invests little value in his so-called best friend and girlfriend respectively. Why they have anything to do with him is another mystery. In fact, Alan poses the very question to Nicole, and her response is she's not in love with him and doesn't know why she's involved with him. If you feel like that, love, now is the best time to haul ass and run for the hills. For your money, you get 2 well-staged motor chases. Well-staged for the time and resources, that is. It's not Bullet or The French Connection, but the motorbike and car chase scenes are fairly thrilling and fraught with danger, well edited to give a realistic impression of velocity. Reeves has taken a decent shot at making a contemporary horror flick with psychological depth and bold underpinning themes. There's a nod to the culture clash between the old and the young. Politically and socially, the old had lost control of the youth of the 60s, and the film treats us to a fantasy example of the old taking it back. The young were socially mobile, had money, their own art, lifestyles and language, a different way of being. The old were stuck at home, trapped in their kitchens, devalued like Marcus and Estelle, whilst the world outside moved on. As for the young, they feared loss of identity, loss of self in an increasingly permissive and socially complex society. In Western civilization, the old traditionally feed off the young, a situation to some extent the young might well resent. Welcome to your nightmare, kids. The metaphors Reeves employs strike multiple chords. Now, unlike my long-standing misconception that The Creeping Flesh was a Tygon picture when it wasn't, this time I was right. Tony Tensor Films was the production company and his Tygon Pictures organization distributed. Some interesting asides, Stanley Long was the cinematographer. Earlier in the decade he had worked on 2 exploitation documentaries, London in the Raw and Primitive London. His style was ideally suited to add in a seedier, cheerless character to the London locations and the cramped interiors. Actor-composer Paul Ferris, who would appear in Witchfinder General and write the score for that film, creating some fabulous pastoral soundscapes, did the soundtrack duties here. He wrote some original but nondescript pop songs for the nightclub scenes, but really excelled with the electronic sonics. This was Susan George's first screen role. She was 17. She looks about 12. Catherine Lacey won the Best Actress Award at the Trieste Science Fiction Film Festival in 1968. She was 64. She looked about 84. The Sorcerers is a landmark 60s genre picture. In acknowledging the shift towards more psychologically focused and socially intimate horror, Reeves cooks up a pacey little chiller that explores themes of control, power, identity, psychological manipulation, and the eternal division and alienation between the old guard and the young. He bucks the traditional horror movie trends of the time, in which the evil is routinely vanquished and the restoration of order succeeds in laying chaos and madness to rest. The outcome here is a bleak and futile affair. The protagonist dies screaming, and so too do the antagonists. No happy ending, but perhaps a fitting one. Life ain't all chocolate chunk rainbow cookies and pink lemonade after all. The monsters are real, and worse than that, human. Thank you for your time and attention. Please feel free to do whatever you choose to do next. Hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, check out my early access Patreon thing, or even make a welcome financial contribution via the thanks button. Back soon as I can get my act together again. Ciao for now, pilgrims.